She was admired by many, an accomplished philanthropist, a woman of elegance and warmth. At 57, Emma had built a life filled with purpose and grace, a beacon of resilience after enduring personal tragedy. But tonight, everything shattered. This very moment would etch her name into headlines and haunt those who knew her. Caleb, her husband, a man nearly 2 decades younger, captivating and charming, the perfect partner to heal her grief, now lay dead by her hand. 19 stab wounds, each fueled by a rage so fierce it consumed every ounce of her restraint. But what could drive a woman of such poise, such composure, to commit an act so brutal? The answers are buried in a hidden betrayal, one that struck not just her marriage but the very foundation of her trust. Her husband, the man she adored, had carried a secret so devastating it turned love into fury and shattered their once perfect life. This is the story of Emma, a woman betrayed in the most unimaginable way, a tale of forbidden desires, unimaginable deceit, and a moment of uncontrollable rage that would change her life forever. What unfolded in that home is not just a crime, but the unraveling of a life, a marriage, and a trust that should have been unbreakable. What would you do if the person you loved most betrayed you in the most unforgivable way? Welcome to Shocking True Crime Stories HQ. A big thank you to all my viewers, and a special shout out to my subscribers for your unwavering support as we explore famous and hidden true crime stories. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more fascinating content. She was the kind of woman who left a lasting impression. At 57, Emma radiated an energy that defied her years. Her laughter was infectious, her presence magnetic. With every step, she carried an air of grace that turned heads and warmed hearts. A devoted philanthropist, she spent her days giving back to the world, filling the void left behind by a tragedy that had reshaped her life forever. Her first husband was the love of her life, a man whose steady devotion had been her anchor for decades. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. One fateful evening, his solo trip to Los Angeles turned into a nightmare. The plane that was supposed to bring him home never landed. A mechanical failure, a sudden descent, and in an instant, he was gone. The grief was unbearable, an open wound that refused to heal. For years, she buried herself in her work, using philanthropy as both an escape and a lifeline. She poured her heart into helping others, hoping to find solace in their smiles. Yet, the loneliness remained, a constant shadow, lingering just out of sight. And then came Caleb. At 39, he was the kind of man who could charm a room without saying a word. Tall, handsome, with a disarming smile that seemed to promise safety and understanding. Caleb wasn't just attractive, he was attentive, a rare listener who made Emma feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. He was everything she thought she'd never find again. Their connection was electric, their conversations effortless. In Caleb, Emma found something she didn't realize she'd been searching for, a second chance at love. His youthful charm and unwavering attention reignited a spark she believed had been extinguished forever. It wasn't long before they exchanged vows, committing to a whirlwind romance that promised to heal old wounds and breathe new life into Emma's future. Theirs was a union celebrated by friends and envied by many, a love story born from heartbreak but built on hope. But even the most beautiful love stories can hide dark chapters, and this one was no exception. Behind Caleb's charming smile lay a secret that would destroy the very foundation of their marriage. For now, though, Emma had no reason to suspect that the man she called her savior would soon become the source of her greatest betrayal. To those who knew him, Caleb was everything Emma deserved, a devoted husband, a steady companion, a man who could make anyone feel important with just a look. His charm was effortless, his demeanor magnetic, and his ability to make people feel special seemed almost uncanny. But behind the easy smiles and kind gestures lay a part of him no one ever saw, a part of him that, over time, would unravel everything Emma thought she knew. Jakes was 23, young, full of ambition, and carrying the quiet confidence of someone just stepping into adulthood. Emma saw him as a son, the only piece of her late husband she had left. Caleb, on the other hand, saw something else, something he would never admit aloud but couldn't seem to hide from himself. It started innocently, or so it seemed. A compliment here, a laugh there. Caleb would comment on Jake's appearance in ways that seemed harmless at first. "You've been hitting the gym, haven't you?" he'd say, his tone just a little too playful. Or, "You've got great taste, Jakes. Maybe you can help me with a new look." At first, no one noticed. Why would they? Caleb was friendly, after all, engaging, approachable. But for Jakes, the attention started to feel different. The lingering glances, the way Caleb's smile would tighten when no one else was looking, the way his voice would drop just slightly when they were alone. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. Caleb's interest in Jakes became harder to ignore. Emma, always busy with her charity work, missed the signs. But for Jakes, the weight of Caleb's attention began to feel suffocating. Yet, he said nothing. How could he? Caleb was his stepfather, after all, a man who was supposed to be a protector, a guide, not this. Still, Caleb pushed boundaries in ways that were easy to dismiss but impossible to ignore. Suggestive comments disguised as jokes. Invitations for private conversations that didn't seem necessary. And always that look, the one that said more than words ever could. But the most dangerous thing about Caleb wasn't what he said or did. It was the way he made people doubt their instincts, question their own reality. He was the kind of man who could make you wonder if the line you thought he crossed was ever there to begin with. And for 2 years, that doubt would be enough to keep his secret safe. Trust is a fragile thing, delicate, vulnerable, easily shattered. In the confines of Emma's home, a boundary was crossed that could never be undone. It started with a moment Caleb knew he could manipulate, a moment when Jakes hesitated just long enough to be drawn into something he didn't fully understand. And once the line was crossed, there was no going back. "You can trust me," Caleb had said, his voice so steady it almost felt reassuring. "No one has to know. It's just between us, Jakes. You'll see. It'll be worth it." Jakes looks away, his discomfort visible. His hands grip the edge of the couch as Caleb's words linger in the air. For a moment, the room feels smaller, suffocating. He resisted at first. How could he not? Caleb was his stepfather, someone who should have been a source of guidance and safety. But Caleb was persistent. He knew exactly what to say, how to frame his desires as something harmless, even natural. He painted it as a secret they could share, a bond no one else would understand. And Jakes, young and uncertain, began to doubt himself. Jakes was hesitant, his conscience screaming at him to walk away. But Caleb had a way of twisting reality, of making wrong feel right. "This isn't about anyone else," Caleb would say. "It's just you and me. No one ever has to find out." And so it began, a forbidden affair hidden in plain sight. For 2 years, they carried their secret like a ticking time bomb, each moment laced with the fear of discovery. In the quiet corners of the house, in the fleeting glances exchanged at family dinners, the truth lingered, just beneath the surface. The affair took its toll on Jakes. The secrecy, the lies, the constant fear. It was a weight he carried every day. Caleb, on the other hand, thrived in the shadows. To him, the risk was part of the thrill. But for Jakes, it was a prison. The tension escalates as scenes of near discovery play out. Emma walking into a room just as Caleb pulls away from Jakes. A phone left unlocked with messages that Caleb quickly deletes. An unexplained shift in Jake's demeanor that Emma notices but doesn't understand. There were moments when the truth was almost exposed. Moments when Emma's instincts told her something was off. But Caleb was a master of deception. A reassuring smile, a well-placed lie, and the moment would pass. For a while, at least. Their secret grew heavier with time, the cracks in their facade becoming harder to conceal. And yet, Caleb continued to push, his arrogance blinding him to the storm that was building just out of view. Caleb believed he had everything under control. He underestimated the power of guilt, of suspicion, of truth fighting its way to the surface. And when the facade finally broke, it would do so in the most devastating way imaginable. But before the shocking confrontation, what do you think you would have done if you were in Emma's shoes? Would you have noticed the signs, or would you have trusted the ones you loved the most? Let us know in the comments below. She wasn't supposed to be there. That night, the storm had other plans. Winds howled through the city, grounding flights and forcing Emma to return home hours earlier than expected. For her, it was a minor inconvenience, a night disrupted, nothing more. But what awaited her behind the walls of her own home would forever alter the course of her life. Home was supposed to be her refuge. As the car pulled up to the driveway, the glow of the living room lights spilling onto the lawn offered a sense of comfort. She wasn't entirely surprised to see the house lit up. Caleb was home, after all. Perhaps Jake's, too. She smiled faintly at the thought of her family waiting for her return, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering within her own walls. At first, the scene didn't register. She walked through the hallway, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. She called out to Caleb, expecting to hear his usual cheerful reply. But the house was quiet, too quiet, except for the faint sound of muffled laughter, hushed whispers, coming from upstairs. Her hand tightened on the banister as she reached the top. The door to the guest room was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the hallway. She stepped closer, her heart quickening with each step, and then she saw it. It was a moment frozen in time. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Caleb, her husband, Jake's, the boy she loved like a son, together, in her home, breaking every vow, every bond, every shred of trust she'd ever known. "Emma," Caleb started, his voice a mix of fear and desperation, but she didn't hear him. The words didn't register. All she could see was the betrayal, playing on a loop in her mind. All she could feel was the weight of 2 years of lies crashing down around her. Her rage was all-consuming, a fire ignited by the unbearable weight of betrayal. Her hands moved on instinct, reaching for the first thing she could find. The cold, unforgiving blade of a kitchen knife. She gripped it tightly, the steel reflecting the overhead light as her mind raced through the chaos of what she'd just seen.
Emma, stop.
Caleb shouted, his voice cracking with panic. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. The betrayal had shattered something deep inside her, something that couldn't be pieced back together. In her mind, there was only one thought, one driving force: justice for what he had done to her. Was it rage, heartbreak, or the sheer weight of betrayal that drove her to the breaking point? The answer may never be fully known. But in that moment, Emma made a choice, one that would forever change the lives of everyone in that house. Before we reveal what happened next, tell us, what would you have done in Emma's place? Let us know in the comments. If you're captivated by this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. There's more to uncover, and the next chapter will leave you speechless. It wasn't the kind of rage that burned hot and quick, fading as swiftly as it ignited. This was different, deeper, darker, the kind that consumed a person entirely. In that moment, standing in her kitchen with a knife in her trembling hand, Emma wasn't herself. She was something else entirely, a woman betrayed, broken, and pushed beyond the brink. Caleb's voice broke through the haze, pleading, desperate. "Emma, listen to me. Let me explain." But there was nothing he could say to erase the images seared into her mind. His words were hollow, bouncing off the walls of her fury. He tried to close the distance between them, his tone shifting from pleading to commanding. "Put the knife down, Emma. Let's talk about this." But every step he took toward her only fueled the fire burning inside her. Her thoughts raced, years of lies, of deceit, of betrayal. And then, in a single, blinding moment, it all came crashing down. 1, 2, 3. Each strike carried the weight of her heartbreak, the pain of her shattered trust. Caleb staggered backward, his hands clutching at his chest as he tried to speak, but the words never came. He fell to the floor, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief, as Emma continued, her tears blurring her vision. Jakes wanted to stop her, to say something, to do something, but his body wouldn't obey. He stood there, rooted to the spot, his mind screaming at him to intervene, yet his feet wouldn't move. All he could do was watch as Caleb's lifeless body lay sprawled on the kitchen floor, surrounded by a pool of crimson. For a brief moment, the house fell silent. The storm outside had quieted, the echoes of chaos fading into an eerie calm. And then the flashing red and blue lights lit up the windows, casting shadows across the walls as the police arrived. Jakes was left behind, his world crumbling around him. The questions came fast and relentless. Officers demanding answers, piecing together the events that had led to this unthinkable act. And when Jakes finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper, weighed down by shame and regret. He told them everything: the affair, the lies, the betrayal. He exposed the truth, unraveling the secret Caleb had worked so hard to keep. And so it ended. One moment of unthinkable betrayal leading to an act of unimaginable violence. But was it justice? Was it revenge? Or was it something far more complicated? Something that defied simple explanation? The courtroom was packed. Every seat was filled with eager eyes, every corner teeming with whispers. Journalists jostled for the best angles, their cameras poised to capture the drama. This wasn't just a trial. It was a spectacle, a story too gripping for the world to ignore. At the center of it all sat Emma, the vibrant philanthropist whose life had taken a dark, violent turn. She looked nothing like the woman the world once knew. Gone was the warmth, the spark that had once lit up every room she entered. What remained was a shadow of her former self, still dignified, still composed, but weighed down by the burden of what she had done. Yet, her eyes carried something else as well, a quiet defiance, as though daring the world to judge her. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his tone sharp, deliberate. "This is a case of premeditated murder. The evidence is clear. 19 stab wounds, each one deliberate, each one intended to end a life. This was not a momentary lapse. This was not an accident. This was a choice, a calculated, cold-blooded act." But the defense would not let the narrative stand. Her lawyer rose next, a seasoned woman with an air of quiet authority. Her voice was calm, measured, but carried an unmistakable intensity. "Emma Harper is not a murderer," she declared, her eyes sweeping across the courtroom. "She is a woman who was betrayed in the most unforgivable way. Her husband, the man she trusted above all others, violated not only her marriage but her family. What you see here is not premeditation. What you see is a crime of passion, a moment of uncontrollable rage triggered by a devastating betrayal." The courtroom was a battleground of emotions. Gasps echoed when the affair was revealed in graphic detail. Reporters scribbled furiously, the public's hunger for every sordid detail insatiable. But through it all, Emma sat silently, her face betraying nothing. If she felt remorse, she didn't show it. If she felt anger, she hid it well. After weeks of testimony, the moment of truth had arrived. The jury filed back into the room, their faces unreadable. The judge asked the question that would decide Emma's fate, and the foreperson spoke with a voice that carried the weight of finality. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Emma Harper, guilty of first-degree murder." The world outside erupted. Protesters gathered on the courthouse steps, some crying for justice, others demanding mercy. The media dissected every detail, turning Emma into both a villain and a victim. In the court of public opinion, the lines between right and wrong blurred. Her story was over, or perhaps it had only just begun. For some, she was a murderer who deserved her fate. For others, she was a woman pushed to her limits, driven to an act of violence by an unimaginable betrayal. In the end, the truth was hers alone to bear. What do you think? Was justice served? Or was Emma a victim of circumstances beyond her control? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Stories like Emma's don't just haunt us because of their tragedy, they stay with us because they force us to confront questions we often avoid. How much betrayal can one endure before breaking? How far would you go when trust, love, and loyalty are shattered beyond repair? This wasn't just a story about a woman's rage or a man's deceit. It was a story about the fragility of human relationships, the weight of secrets, and the devastating consequences of choices made in the dark. Emma's life, once vibrant and full of purpose, now exists within the confines of a small, gray room. She has become a symbol of justice for some, of tragedy for others. But for her, the labels no longer matter. Her world was shattered, and she acted in a way that she could never undo. It's easy to cast judgment from the outside, to say what she should have done, or how she could have reacted differently. But the truth is never that simple. Anger can be blinding. Betrayal can feel like drowning. And in the heat of those moments, decisions are made that can never be taken back. The fallout from one choice, one action, rippled outward, destroying lives, shattering families, and leaving behind questions that may never truly be answered. Could it all have been prevented? Should Jakes have spoken out earlier? Was Caleb's betrayal inevitable? Or could he have stopped himself before it was too late? And what about forgiveness? Can it exist in the aftermath of such devastation? For Jakes, who carries his own guilt. For Emma, who may spend the rest of her life asking herself the same questions you now ask. So now the question is yours to answer. Could Emma's actions have been prevented? What would you do if faced with unimaginable betrayal? Would you find another way? Or would your anger lead you down the same path? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What are your takeaways from this story? And if you've been captivated by this tale of heartbreak and consequence, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. There are more stories to tell.